Welcome everyone to Tuesday night. Pau Hana here at First Unitarian Church of Honolulu. My name is Reverend TJ Fitzgerald. I'm the minister here. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And this is a time every week, almost every week when I'm not feeling sick, we get together and hopefully deepen our knowledge and our understanding of some of the things going on in our world. We do it through many different ways, but one of our favorite ways is to meet people in the community who are doing the good work that we strive to do and to partner with as well. So we could not be happier to have with us today Shayna Lonoaea-Alexander, who is at the ACLU of Hawaii, to talk more about some of the work she is doing and to answer some of our questions about how we can help. So hi, Shayna, do you want to say hi and tell us what you do?
All right, awesome. Yeah, hi, aloha, everyone. My name is, again, Shayna Lonoaea-Alexander. I'm the field organizer at ACLU Hawaii. My pronouns are she, they, and and to just start off, I'm born and raised on Oahu, and I live in Aiea now, but I call, Wahua is where I claim my roots. Um, uh, I'm field organizer, so of ACLU Hawaii, and and just give some context. I think this group is pretty familiar with what ACLU does, but we were started in Hawaii in 1965, and we're an affiliate of ACLU National. We're a nonpartisan and nonprofit government watchdog. We were founded after attorneys and community members organized against the Palmer raids, which is when the Attorney General and the Department of Justice was unjustly deporting leftists during the 1920s. We continue to be most known for fights, for legal fights, everything from protecting reproductive freedoms, the freedom to marry, suing the former presidential administration over DACA and the border wall. But my job is mainly to bring the fight to the streets, to the state capitol, and to our neighborhoods, and talk about some really hard issues, but navigate them as a community. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. First, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. It's really an honor to have you. The first thing that comes to mind when someone says that they work to bring these principles to the streets, the first thing that comes to mind is translation, of bringing bigger issues into the lives, or though it seemed like big issues, into the lives of individual people, and show them where they have a stake. And it's something that I, as a minister, do. It's something that a lot of our social justice work is about. Can you say some about maybe recent experiences, or if you're working on something now that you've kind of faced this idea of, here's this idea or big concept, but here's how we're getting it in the streets, here's how we're getting it into people's lives? Is that something you faced?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, so one of the things that so I was originally hired with the Smart Justice campaign, which is a campaign of ACLU Hawaii, to be the organizer for the Smart Justice campaign. And I think when I think of translating one of those big words or big ideas, is the mission of the Smart Justice campaign is to decarcerate Hawaii and to tackle the racial disparities in the criminal legal system that continue to devastate Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders. And decarcerate is I think not a very common term, but it basically means to get people out of cages. And so when it comes to my work at the ACLU Hawaii, I think that all things are political and personal. For me, talking about mass incarceration and criminalization of Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders is a very personal issue. My dad, the way that I was connected and grew up learning about my dad was through handwritten letters and phone calls, because he was incarcerated for many years here on Oahu, and in private prisons like Saguaro in Arizona. So basically, I connect with folks who have and there are many, right? There are thousands of people in Hawaii who are incarcerated and who have stories like mine and families like mine. So I connect with them. We talk about these big issues, and then that seem very lofty, and that seem that only attorneys or people who are lobbyists can talk about in the state capitol. But those are conversations we have over dinner, with our families, and talking about why someone isn't there, or why someone isn't there during the holidays. Because I think it really impacts all of us. And I think part of organizing is giving us the tools and the resources and the language to unpack those big ideas and principles and values and bring it home. Yeah.
Is this right? Is it 40% of people incarcerated in the state of Hawaii have Hawaiian ancestry? And that's just Hawaiian ancestry, doesn't even get into Pacific Islander wider. And the highest percentage of anyone who is sent to Arizona are people of Hawaiian ancestry. Are both of those things still true? That's last I understood it, that's still the case.
So, so 40% reflects Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. Uh, it's one of those things where like disaggregated data continues to be a problem. But yeah, it's Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders are all lumped into that 40%. Despite us making only up like total though, like Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders only make up around 22 to 23% of the population. Okay. But these numbers are also reflective of like, that came out of the OHA report like a decade ago. So we don't even really have any comprehensive data like right now.
And what is there like a push to prevent that, or are you running into roadblocks in getting the data that you need in order to advocate, or is there some other reason why the data is hard to get, or what's happening with that?
It's a number of reasons. The most pressing one that I think like right now in terms of trying to get that sort of data is I just like right before I hopped on this call, I saw that the governor is only going to fund the commission, the Oversight Commission on Hawaii's prisons and jails to the tune of $10,000 for this fiscal year. And they're responsible, right? Like, and they've sent letters, they've voted on this, like they've been around for a while now, and they've like done interviews because they're trying to hire a coordinator and actual staff that would look at data, would look at the oversight of all the people that are incarcerated, of all the staffers, of the facilities. Like these are the people who are responsible for that. And just now the governor said that he will only fund $10,000 into that commission, which like personally, I think if I was a commissioner who like they do this all for free and they have to provide oversight into all of these things that touch on prisons, and they're only getting $10,000, I'd be a little insulted, right? Especially with COVID-19 devastating folks inside. Yeah, like that's a prime, like doing that, funding our departments, like and giving commissions and task force the money that they need to get that data would help lock things down. I think also, like that's a main one. I think of also attitudes around racial justice. I think there's a lot of roadblocks in terms of government agencies and public officials, even acknowledging that systemic racism exists within the system. That also provides barriers into like.
We might have lost you, Shayna.
Oh, there and then here you kind of get that same attitude. Yeah. So sorry. So okay. Like getting that real data to be like how people identify or who they are, it's really important.
So this is so confounding to me that people who understand or are supposed to understand the law don't see disparate treatment, at least disparate treatment, if not systemic racism in the prison populations. I feel like courts have found that the definition of discrimination and racism is in the numbers. You know, there's the famous New Jersey DWI case where they're like, by percentage, this is inherently racist because, and it has strict scrutiny under the Constitution. How do you feel? And I don't want to get too far into constitutional mumbo jumbo, but to me, I still cannot grasp how someone who calls themselves a lawmaker can't see the disparate treatment that this is an inherently racist institution. It is very founding, if not its execution today. Terrible word, but you know the way it's being meted out today. Is there any discussion like that at the level of just like can you argue that this isn't racist just by the numbers? Does that get any traction?
Um, so it's this thing where, well, one, I think that like white supremacy, colonialism, and like the war on drugs has done such a number on our communities and our elected officials that a lot of our lawmakers adopt that tough on crime sort of rhetoric, because it's I think one, it's easy, right? It's something that we're all familiar with. And it's hard to go against the grain and say like, and actually tackle issues head on. But then I also think of how 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 that, like, if we knew that science and data was the reason why we passed laws and passed good laws, then we wouldn't have dozens and dozens of commissions and task force that are comprised of experts. Like literally, we have so many task force, like so many task force that have been created, comprised of all of Hawaii's experts and researchers to do the work. Like lawmakers don't have to lift their finger. Like they create task force that generate like huge reports, such as like HCR 85, that basically goes into all the different reforms and policies that need to change in order to make public safety a real thing in Hawaii. And if if we knew that, but we know that that's not what convinces lawmakers, right? It is emotional appeals. It is the storytelling and changing people's hearts and minds, and especially those within their constituency, that really, I think, hits. And I think that we're in a place right now where we're starting to have conversations in our community around white supremacy, around racism. And I think that that definitely has been an effect on who we're electing, who we're voting for, and the conversations that lawmakers are having at the state capitol. But we definitely need to have those conversations more. Yeah, I don't know if you've been to a hearing, because those can be raw.
Well, that brings us to a really good question that I've gotten from a congregant. She is looking at the story of the horrifying murder recently of the 18-month-old baby girl, and then the fear that crime like that will be conflated into the kinds of minor crimes and nonviolent drug offenses that people are thinking are the same thing, that in order to prevent the ending of cash bail or to decarcerate or to abolish whatever camp we're sort of talking about, those three things are very interrelated, not exactly the same. But how do we respond when those kinds of things are happening, and then you hear the argument, well, this is what happens when you let the crazy liberals, run the show. These kinds of people are out there. We can't let them be. Is it the same old narrative, or like you say, you bring this to people on the street? How do you talk, to people who are kind of seeing things that way?
Part of it is like actively listening, because I think that at the core of it is like we care about each other, and that's why we rely on those talking points, right? Of that tough on crime era, and that we rely on the stereotypes that kind of coddle us and like protect us from like actually having to have a real conversation about what it would mean to have provided the care to the people who do harm, so that it would have prevented the harm from being done in the first place. And when I think of the baby that was just killed, and I'm so upset because when I think about it, because I'm a young woman and one day I hope to have children with my partner. I can't imagine what the family is going through right now. And I also think of how right now the state is considering defunding domestic violence programs to the tune of 30%. And I think of how reentry programs that are focused, because I saw that the man who did that, he was arrested and had a record, and how many reentry programs that need to be in place in order to catch people, so that they have a safety net and that they have programming and food and shelter and all of these things, and like mental health and healthcare services that can help people when they're in crisis, and also just prevent that from even getting to that place. I know that and while I'm talking about this, I realize that the public safety department their reentry services office, which helps people return into community when they're leaving incarceration from our prisons and jails, they're being defunded by, I think it's something like $500,000 or million, something like that. They're being defunded. So I think that during these moments, we have to lean into what our priorities are and how are we trying to protect each other, because we know that locking someone away doesn't actually address the issue. It just pushes 95% of people who get incarcerated return back into our communities. And what are we going to do what are we doing to ensure that when people come out, they're able to pursue lives that are safe, that are happy, that are healthy. And I don't think that the current system accounts for that. Right now, we take the very, I think the very tried response, like the response that's happened, that's been happening for, as long as we've had the carceral system, to just lock people away. And I think that there's more that we can be doing. And I think that, there's just so much more. There's so many better alternatives to just continue to invest in incarcerating folks over drugs, because we also know that incarcerating people increases their likelihood of reoffending, of not returning back into community, and that you've trapped a person into a cycle of harm and trauma. I think of all the ways that the man who did this immense harm could have been prevented. And that has, and I guess I'll just kind of like leave it at that,
Yeah, thank you for that. And what I've noticed in our conversation already is that you keep bringing us back to conversation and story, about really speaking with people and telling a story. I remember just you talking about someone not being present for a holiday or something like that, and the thought of explaining this to a child, and a story of shame maybe, or of guilt, or something like that that's associated. And it seems like a lot of what we're talking about is a better conversation. Can you say something about in your work, is that an area that you're finding is like helping people or working with people to tell a new story about people who have been victims of this system, and who are coming back, and to try to release stigma? I mean, one of my life's callings is to try to release stigma and shame over things like this. How have you found that an effective tool? And if so, like, can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think of how growing up, like, I didn't tell anyone when I was a kid that my dad was in like OCCC or Halava. Like, that's just not something that you would share. And like now we live in this digital age, right? On Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where you share a lot of things about yourself to like basically a lot of times strangers. And a part of me really wishes that I had more people, I had more friends, that I had more connection when I was younger, to be able to talk to somebody about it other than my mom and my aunties, where it'd always be like this very like hush hush sort of thing. Because I think then I wouldn't have like gone through so much like shame and trauma, and like trying to navigate like what it means. Because I also had like a lot of preconceived notions about what who and what like incarcerated people are. And I think it definitely impacted my relationship with my dad. And it's a conversation that I have with other folks too, especially with people who have loved ones inside, to just be able to hear that like it's okay to love your person that's inside, and it's okay to support them, and it's okay to love them fully as they are. And I think that's always a hard conversation to have, because we hear it in the news constantly, right? About like, we see people's mugshots, we see things that people are allegedly doing. And for a lot of us, that means defining people by their worst days, rather than who they could have been and who they could be, who they are. And so, I mean, this also brings up for me, I also run a prison abolitionist PenFo program that's Hawaii based. And I connect people who are inside um, to people who are outside, who are committed, who strive to see people as they are, but are committed to abolishing the prison industrial complex in Hawaii. And we talk to folks and we reach out to them and just talk to them about what it means to envision and to like hear from them what would Hawaii look like without cages, and also like connecting to their stories of like their families, because and this the hardest part is hearing when they tell me that they haven't talked to a family member for years, or they haven't talked to because their family member or their mom or whoever was so ashamed uh, by them getting arrested, and about what it meant about like their family or their parenting or their faith. But for me, what I've reconciled, I think within like the past 2 years, is that my I think that the immense love and care that I've been given in from growing up in Hawaii, from being raised by my parents and my community, is what leads me to love folks who are incarcerated and people who have experienced incarceration and their loved ones. And I think like centering that into the relationships and talking about stigma around incarceration helps me. When folks like share with me, because I just don't think like we see it enough from the side of, we always see like the viral stuff that goes, all the viral stuff on like Hawaii viral feed and all that, like making fun of people. But I want to center it back into like, that's somebody's uncle, that's somebody's dad, that's somebody's cousin, probably my cousin, like, and lean into the values that like, Hawaii is very family based. We care for one another. And that's what I think of when it comes to stigma.
I can say that I'm not from here. I'm from Connecticut, so I can't really talk about any real history or roots. But I went through like a phase of coming here and hearing everyone talk about sort of Hawaiian exceptionalism, or like the state. Well, it's different here. It's different here. It's different here. And my initial thought was, well, it's really not. If you really look, it's kind of the same, and da da da. And now I've been here long enough that I'm like, I feel like this place, these islands, really have something to teach the world, and certainly the rest of what is claimed as a country that these islands are part of. I mean, is there something in your experience in particular that you think this state does have to teach, or these islands have to teach the rest of the world about handling this? I should really say the rest of the states, because a lot of the rest of the world handles, well, certainly the industrialized world handles criminal situations or decriminalization very differently. But is there a primary lesson you think that we have a hope to share with others here, or are you in that hopeful place or not yet?
I strive to be in the hopeful place, right? I think that in order for me to share a message of love and care, I have to also feel it myself. And I know I feel it because it's been shared with me. Um, I think what's unique to Hawaii is, I think, the concept of pu'uhonua, the idea of refuge, the idea that is rooted in Hawaii, that that people who have done harm seek to become accountable, that they want to be, that they're not forced into situations or places or by people in order to reconcile that harm, that we seek transformative justice within ourselves and within each other. Joy Enomoto, who's a Black Kanaka abolitionist, she said, genuine security is when we build pu'uhonua within each other. And that's something I've been trying to strive for and live in, is that I, strive to not police each other, I strive not to hurt one another. And then when I do, I strive to not just restore, I don't want to go back to the place that we were before this harm was committed. I want to transform our relationship into one that was better. I think that pu'uhonua is so rooted in Hawaii because it's what our ancestors did, right? You would go to a heiau when you had committed great harm, and you would go there to learn and to work the land and to seek out, to seek counsel from like your community and from people you've harmed, uh, to transform your relationship to your community, the Aina, um, into one that was better than when you entered it. I think of how there are pu'uhonua everywhere throughout Hawaii. There's pu'uhonua Waianae, where they take in our unsheltered neighbors and build community. There's the pu'uhonua o pu'uhuluhulu that was crafted out of Mamakea protest and demonstration, where they had their own university that they built, and also built the entire encampment, right? Like with establishing food and water and meeting people's basic needs in such a short period of time. And I think that pu'uhonua is definitely something I think that could be not just like shared with the world, but also needs to be shared within our own communities, that we can have that again and that we do have that, and it just needs to be nurtured. And that's my hope constantly. It's actually what I named the Pen Pal program after, is Pu'uhonua Pen Pal, so that we can seek refuge and build it within each other. So yeah, that's my Hawaii thing.
Are there that's beautiful. Thank you. Especially seeking refuge and cultivating refuge in one another. Iwamoto's quote there. Yeah, I think a lot about safety, and I think right now a lot of folks have seen, something nationally that was very unsafe and dangerous. Um, when we talk about safety, but it really is fear, you know, and I think safety is a nice way to talk, to say someone is afraid. And when you talk about refuge, that is like the diminution of fear, is to go to a place where there isn't judgment, or there isn't um, fear for either party, for the person who experienced the wrong or the person who committed it. Um, so anyway, I'm just sort of extemporizing, but um, when you talk about the Pen Pal program, it makes me wonder what other programs are going on that people can be aware of. So you talked about the Pen Pal program, you talked about some of the other work that's going on. So what are the other day-to-day projects that you're working on with the ACLU of Hawaii to bring some of these things about?
Yeah, so at ACLU Hawaii, as a lot of you probably know, the legislative session is in full gear. Um, and man, are they not friendly? A lot of these reforms that we're calling for in terms of sentencing and bail reform and police reform are really unfriendly things right now to the legislature, because they're really trying to spearhead the construction of new jails. Um, they're trying to fund programs that they believe will bring about more economic growth. Um, but we just also know, like, going back to that thing of like, we know that they don't always trust data and science, because if they did, they would listen to the reports and the experts and the researchers. So they're still funding things like fixing the reflective pools at the state capitol to the tune of $30 million, right? They've allotted a lot of like millions of dollars towards like vanity projects like that don't really have any impact on our day-to-day life, and more so have a lot to do with making the state look pretty, but look like, again, pretty for who? I don't think that the reflective pools really matter to have any impact on my quality of life. And so what we've been doing, and so this past weekend, for instance, we've been phone banking, my interns and volunteers have been phone banking into Representative Nakashima and Senator Nishihara's districts, and getting folks to call and ask them to schedule important police reform and bills that would demilitarize police, that would end qualified immunity, which would allow victims of police harm and misconduct to sue individual officers. And the third one is the Justice for Breonna Taylor law, which would ban no-knock raids in Hawaii. And then the last bill that we're trying to get scheduled is this bill would put a moratorium on new jail projects for the next year, allowing time for the state and for advocates to really lean in and understand, why do we need this jail? And ACLU believes we don't, because if we did any of these basic reforms, such as bail, such as police reforms, such as sentencing reforms, we wouldn't have the overcrowding situation that we have now. Just very basic reforms that would also stop penalizing people for experiencing poverty, such as like our houses folks, and instead shifting that money, that $500 million that's slated to go into a new Halava jail, that could simply go into reentry and housing programs, because that jail is being constructed mostly just to house people who are pre-trial and people who are leaving prison. So it's just entirely frustrating because that money that's being allotted that's only the building of. We haven't talked the operation, we haven't talked the programming, we haven't talked the staff. And we know that the state will continue to build when the state builds new cages, they'll just continue to fill it, right? Because then lawmakers are then have pressure to justify the increasing costs of these projects, which could mean more tough on crime legislation that further criminalizes Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, and people experiencing poverty. So the work that people can really plug into is, I know Carla, we like just created a postcard campaign with writing letters to key lawmakers, and especially your lawmakers, about these bills. I will drop this in the chat right now, and it is the ACLU Hawaii policy priorities. You can also visit our website where we have everything, and to check out those bills and the talking points on why we believe that they're important. It's an uphill battle right now because the legislature is so focused on the budget and less on trying to protect programs that we know work. Earlier I mentioned that they're defunding a lot of domestic violence programs, and we know that has a wide-reaching impact on the safety of women and children. So these are all things that, instead of building new jails, instead of funding, allowing cops to get military-grade weapons and contracts, instead of allowing, the upkeep of a reflective pool, those are things that we should be funding. I forgot to mention the governor's also defunding the Civil Rights Commission, which oversees anytime that there is someone believes that they've been discriminated in the workplace based on, anything from their gender to their sexual orientation, to their race, to their religion. He's entirely gutting away their investigative team. So while the commission could believe that you might have a valid case, they wouldn't have attorneys on hand, or they wouldn't have investigators on hand to go and thoroughly review your case and gather evidence and stuff like that. I think that we have a lot of work ahead of us, but I think that there is hope because, right, we're having these conversations in community, and that has an impact on so many things at the state legislature. And we know that they're listening because they're really annoyed right now with the number of phone calls and emails that they're getting about these bills and about, I heard that today and this weekend from a number of staffers.
Well, a lot of people are home with not much to do right now. Now 'tis the season. So we'll get into that a little later. But one of the things that you talked about was hope, and what we've heard a lot about is ACLU and the ledge. But one of the questions some people have been sending me in chat is sort of also, are there partners? One person asked, is there like an Innocence Project in Hawaii that's also working on some of this stuff, similar to Brian Stevenson's? I mean, it's not quite the same because there's no death penalty in Hawaii, but is there something like that or other kind of partners that you found?
Sorry, I think you cut off towards the end there.
I'm sorry. Yeah, my neighbors are having a party. Yeah. Are there other are there other forms of support or partnering that you're finding that is giving you hope? Something like Innocence Project or things like that in Hawaii.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We have so many friends. And I think that's what's been so like I moved back for this job from Wyoming and I've made so many friends over the past year. We have we call them our usual suspects, but it's like we can consider them like they've spearheaded and led so much of our criminal justice reform work. And that's like Bob Merce, Kat Brady, folks like that, but it's also expanded to include so many other organizations and people and individuals. So like we're friends with, of course, like with the Innocence Project. They continue to do work to help folks who have been wrongfully convicted. There are a number of like reentry organizations like I'm blanking out on their names, sorry, but like there's a number of reentry organizations that are dedicated to helping folks who come when they're leaving prison and jail to get set up with housing and services and the care that they need. There's the Hawaii for Black Lives movement. They continue to be one of our strongest allies because many of the police reform and prison reform bills are what they've been talking about during this movement and during this time to protect Black lives. There's, let's see, like the Young Progressives, I work a lot with them. The Young Progressives Demanding Action. I have like literally a whole spreadsheet and I can't. We talk to them daily and we meet weekly to talk about strategy and all these bills and other ways to lean in on the work. And we all tackle it from like a bunch of different areas. I think of, there are different ways to look at the work. Like some folks do power with, where they build power through like service providing, right? Like, so that's the Hawaii harm and community, Hawaii harm and health
reduction,
harm reduction.
Yeah.
Sorry. All those Hawaii health and harm, them and like power with.
Yeah.
We have tons of allies and we meet weekly, if not daily sometimes, to just go over what bills are still alive or what can we all still help and fight for.
Mm-hmm. Do you have allies? So one person asks about the value of Hawaii too. Like I think it's a movie, and in it the warden of WCCC wrote a section, or it's a book, I guess, creating Bu'uhonua in the center in WCCC. And do you know if that's still going on? If there is some kind of movement or anyone on the inside who is also working with you, any allies? The look on your face tells me maybe not so much, but any hope there that you've seen?
So what comes up for me is, there's a group called, and I totally should have named, Ikolu Meanui. I don't know if you saw them in the news this past, in the Star Advertiser this past weekend, but they're a newly formed Native Hawaiian criminal justice group that was founded by these two parents that have incarcerated son in Saguaro. And they sell seeds of change, which are basically like lihimoi, sour, like, crack seed. And they fund like re-entry for Native Hawaiians who are leaving incarceration. They're a great one of our allies. But specifically around the Pu'uhonua bit, I know that there's great work being done right now in our juvenile justice. I'm not familiar with Hawaii 2. I am familiar with the organization called Ohana Ho'opekele. And they are a number of kupuna who are trying to build like faith pods within all the prisons and jails, where basically people will have the ability to then to basically make it into law that then there's designated places to practice their faith and also their cultural-based practices. Because I think at the moment it's honestly been a bit rolled back in terms of cultural access because of COVID. It's just hard to let folks be in the open, to be out there. So I would look into what the Ohana group is doing in terms of trying to build culturally based programs. Personally, I would struggle with initiatives that are about pu'uhonua that are within a carceral setting. But I think that there can definitely be a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of providing culturally competent care to folks inside.
That one of the things that we always kind of start to zero in on when we have someone who's doing so much work as you are is kind of the question of what can a few people in a church do. I mean, we've got some active people who like to get to work, and I know we're already getting some writers for the letter writing and the postcard campaign, but you've talked about a lot of initiatives you're working on. Is there anything that a group like this could help with? And it's fine if it's donating, it's fine. I mean, just like whatever really the needs are, I think people like to know when someone comes to visit what it is that they could help with the most. So is there anything that comes to mind, or a list of things, a wish list, something like that?
Well, I don't need donations, so I'll stop.
You just became a really popular guest. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. The great thing is that, ACLU is pretty much is a beast. I think of us as like a big shovel in terms of being able to mobilize around these big issues. No, I don't need donations, but I do need people. I need people talking and having hard conversations in community around the issues of mass incarceration, around police violence, and reimagining what Hawaii could look like, building a vision of Hawaii where we're all cared for and accounted for. And I think the way that we can get there are through definitely like making phone calls to legislators. My interns will be starting to set up phone banks in key districts where we're going to be calling people to volunteer to be part of the phone bank, and call into those districts and ask folks to attend neighborhood board meetings or testify on important bills. The great thing is that the people that we're asking folks to call are our supporters. There are people who are on our list for a reason, because they've signed up because they heard about Smart Justice or they were at a demonstration or march. So it tends to be a really friendly list of people that we're always calling through. So hopping onto one of those phone banks would be really great. And I know my interns would really appreciate it, or else they're the ones who are going to have to make all those calls. I think the postcards are wonderful. I think the personal handwritten letter is so impactful, impactful right now in this digital age. But I don't want to discount, if you only have like emails, it's definitely emails. Social media is a much quicker way to get your message across to elected officials. I will drop my ACLU. So this past week, the other week, my interns and I hosted an advocacy training day where we hosted a webinar on the different tools that people can take part in order to advance our policy priorities or these big issues. Like, they don't have to just be, the bills that we've listed, but they can also be more in a general sense around, ending mass incarceration. So the link that I just dropped included a bunch of different actions that you can take, and also organize, your community or your network to also take part in, such as I would consider what we're doing right now a virtual house party, almost, where, I'm just coming in and talking story. But I have in that toolkit, I include how to write a letter to the editor, how to research your legislator, how to write or email or meet with them. And those are definitely things that everyone can do. And if I'm not available, then one of my interns is available to help folks walk through those exercises, because they make such a big impact. And then also we have the ability that, say you did meet with your legislator and you got some really strong, concrete, you asked them to support certain bills and they were really down and they want to do more. You can also just report back to us about that experience, and we'll reach back out to you. Because then we were yes, how are we then going to boost up that legislator's work? Or maybe you had a terrible phone call with a lawmaker who said, you know, they don't want to talk to you anymore, or they really, really hate all the bills that you're trying to get them to support. That's good information for us to know and for our community and allies to know, so that we know what work needs to be done, right? So yeah, I think the legislative advocacy tools are basically my wish list. Take part in any of those, and I would appreciate it. And it's really great because I can also, I read the paper every day, so I can tell who is doing what, and I can also tell who makes calls. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And a lot of gratitude to folks who take action, to not just have conversation, but then mobilize on that.
What's the thank you. And I'll when I post this video, friends, that'll go out on Wednesday, I'll include these links underneath just so that on the website, so, or our webpage, so that when this video goes out with the weekly, I've saved all the chat and everything, and that way you don't have to be running around trying to write these down. Although I think some of them are already available through some other postings that the Eighth Principle Task Force has done and other things like that. But one of the things I was wondering is, have you had a success that you want to talk, or, you know, recently, or since you've only been at this a year, but something that gave you hope, or something that, just so we get a sense of what is a win for you with all that you are facing in headwinds? What does a win look like that we can try to give you?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. So the first thing that comes to mind, that like immediately popped into my head, was the passage of HB 2750 last year. Um, it's been difficult to navigate.
Not everyone knows what that is, so if you could just tell everyone.
So basically, HB, I can't remember the act number, but HB 2750 put an end to stoppers on people's driver's license and car registration. So basically, a stopper was a hold that the government placed on your driver's license or car registration if you had unpaid parking tickets or other civil fees or fines, which like devastates communities, right, that are rural communities, or neighbor islands, people who are living paycheck to paycheck. Just this idea that because you couldn't pay a parking ticket or, you know, whatever sort of fee, now you can no longer drive legally. And we know in Hawaii, a lot of like public transportation is pretty great on Oahu. But still, yeah, you have to plan hours and hours in order to catch the bus, or you have to pay tons of, you know, it's really expensive to catch a Lyft or an Uber or taxi. So it just didn't make any sense in terms of actually doing what it's supposed to be, which is like, okay, which is supposed to like punish people for basically their just inability to pay for a fine. And from the data that we were gathered, something like 18% of Hawaii drivers had a stopper on their driver's license and fees. That's a huge number of people who had these fines and fees that were in collections, and they had to decide whether or not, you know, if it was worth getting arrested for, you know, taking their mom to their doctor's appointment, taking their kids to school, or going to work. All of those things that just place so much stress on working families. And this was especially true on the neighbor islands. We had a listening tour over the summer in 2019, where we went to all the islands, and we talked about smart justice and reimagining police and ending mass incarceration. But the thing that, you know, everyone was like, cool, like, well, I hear you on like what we need to do about the prosecutor, but I'm scared to drop my kid off at school, or I'm scared to go to work because I have a stopper. And it's from those conversations that we introduced that bill. And we flew in a number of formerly incarcerated people, a number of people who have loved ones who are incarcerated, to Oahu for a lobby day, where they talked to, and for many of them the first time, talked to lawmakers, submitted testimony on this bill. And I'm really proud to say that it passed, that it became law this past summer, providing a lot of families with relief. And there's now it's not automatic expungement, but there is a petition process. So now that families we're in the middle of creating a public campaign around letting folks know that they can get this removed off of their record and they no longer have to worry about it. Um, a number of people that I would even just call or talk to in community around smart justice would like just share with me that they have stoppers and how stressful that is, right? Because they have to decide, a lot of them were deciding if they pay rent that month or what food they buy, um, or you know, paying off that stopper fee, which we sent that our stoppers were, we contracted with a Texas-based collections company that also tacked on like a 25% fee on top of that, and you had to pay all of it in order to get it off your record. So I'm so proud of that. Like, I'm so proud of the folks who flew in, who called, who testified on that bill, and especially because I know that a number of other ACLU affiliates had to sue in really big court cases in order to get that law passed or to get that law. So I'm very, very, very proud of that. And that's a really big win. Yeah.
One of the things,
I think that's what a win looks like.
Yeah. One of the things that's coming out for me even is like, I even have a feeling of, oh, I don't want to bother the ACLU. They're busy. Like, they're big. Like, they got stuff going on. But one of the most kind of revealing things that's come out of this is hearing, I want to hear from individual people who are having individual experiences with individual lawmakers, down to that kind of granular information is, to you, is intelligence, you know, is building your campaigns and hearing from people on these neighbor islands or in other places what their real problems are, saved a ton of suffering. And I wonder if there's like a message you have to people who are wondering, oh, well, they're big, they've got lawyers, they're doing their thing. Like, what would you say to someone who's like, I don't want to bother them or whatever? I imagine I know what you're going to say, but go ahead.
Oh, like, definitely hit me up. I I like put in my chat my email and my work phone number. Always down to connect with folks. I think that, you know, ACLU, our ACLU affiliate, we're small but mighty. We're one of like the smallest affiliates in the country. But we strive to be accessible to folks. We do have like a legal, like, for instance, if you're trying to get like, though, if you're trying to get to our legal team because you have legal questions, that's going to take a while.
Yeah.
But like, you can definitely talk to me. My job is explicitly to talk to community, and to build together. And also, I think that also means building and mobilizing leadership within our communities, that there are people, I look at my job as meaning it's my job to provide folks with the opportunity to take action on their values. So I want to always be clear that you should be able to reach out to me, because there's always work to do. I think that, you know, we've highlighted that and we see it, you know, constantly in the news that there's work to do, and we need people to do it. So always feel free to reach out to me, and also through our website. And also, if I don't, you know, if I can't answer your question, there's like in Hawaii, in all communities, our communities are small when it comes to organizing. And if maybe you're passionate about other issues like around environmental justice or reproductive freedoms, there are other organizers who do the same work that I do. And I can connect you with them. But yes, I'm very, very readily available. My phone number and email are in the chat.
Great. So I just want to say the thing that keeps coming to mind, quote, is Dr. West's quote, justice is what love looks like in public. And I got to say, I'm not sure I've had a guest on in a year who maybe more embodies that quote than you. This has been really uplifting and powerful to hear how love and refuge are translating into wins in the legislature and progress you're hoping to make. So it's been a real blessing to have you with us. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That's so kind. I didn't know how this format was going to go. So really excited and I'm really happy to have connected with you all. I really appreciate the time that you've given to me. Yeah, thank you. And I hope that we become friends.
Yes. Yeah. I hope we do too. And I think we'll when something else is happening, or maybe when the ledge is done, and we can do a wrap up call and kind of see how everything went, and do a little Pau Hana strategy recap. But until then, let us know how we can help. And I think some of us are going to be in touch with you. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.